My name is Nancy Mitchell. I'm 32. 2 days before Thanksgiving, my mother texted me, "We've made a reservation at the high-class restaurant, Riverstone Hall. For family only. Please find yourself another place." Her words sounded like a death sentence. But here's the part she didn't know: Riverstone Hall, the restaurant she booked to impress 12 relatives with, belongs to me. Before I tell you how I turned their perfect evening upside down, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been underestimated by your own family. Since childhood, I have worn the label "wrong daughter" so long it feels like a name tag I forgot to peel off. When people ask about my family, I know exactly how the roll call goes in my parents' voices. David, our New York lawyer, navy suits, glossy business cards, the son who makes waiters stand a little straighter. Linda, our nurse, the reliable one, the good mother of two, the woman with a minivan full of snacks and a calendar full of school pickups. And then me, Nancy, who dropped out of college to chase the smell of grilled onions and run around like crazy with pots and pans at 2 in the morning. It didn't start with malice. It started with comparisons. Report cards taped to the fridge in uneven rows. David's AP everything, Linda's honor cords, my crooked flyer for a bake sale I organized to pay for a class trip. Creative, Mom said, pinning it beside David's debate trophy photo as if she had to find a different word for me because the usual ones didn't fit. When I burned my forearm learning to flip omelets in our tiny kitchen, Dad scolded me for being careless, then praised David for negotiating a fee on a mowing job and Linda for mastering a perfect French braid. I heard it even when they didn't say it. Good choices versus the messy ones. So, I tried the right path. I went to state college, declared business because it sounded respectable, sat in lecture halls scribbling cash flow formulas while my mind wandered to the Saturday market, to spices and steam, and the way people light up when food tastes like a memory. The day I skipped managerial accounting to help a friend at her food truck, something clicked. The line, the rhythm, the rush of getting 60 orders out without losing a ticket, my body understood that language better than any textbook. I came back to campus smelling like cumin and smoke, sat through an evening class, and felt like I was pretending to be someone else. Dropping out wasn't one big decision. It was 100 small ones. I moved from a dorm to a sublet over a laundromat, bought used pans from a closed diner, took a job at a taco stand for cash and knowledge. When I told my parents, Dad rubbed his temples and Mom said, too softly, "No one marries a girl who always smells like garlic." I told her I wasn't marrying garlic, I was building something. She sighed like I'd missed the point of life. Meanwhile, the family newsletter wrote itself. David got a job at a Manhattan firm with a name that sounds like a vault. At Christmas, he arrived in a coat that cost more than my total inventory, handed out branded pens, and told stories about partners who see real potential. Mom beamed. Dad tried not to beam and failed. Linda finished nursing school, posted a photo in scrubs with her hair up, then married a decent man who builds decks and never forgets Valentine's Day. They had 2 kids quickly, the kind that make everyone melt at Thanksgiving. At family dinners, my updates were background noise. New sauce, new vendor, finally figured out how to keep tortillas warm in December. Still messing with that truck, and Uncle would say, fork in hand. I learned to smile and pass the rolls. But what they missed, or what they chose not to see, were the nights I was learning a second kind of math. The health inspector found a gasket I didn't know existed. I started at 4 a.m. with wholesale produce and ended at 1 a.m. breaking down equipment in the dark, wrists splattered with oil, brains still counting. The first time a crowd wrapped around the block for my burial, I took a photo from inside the truck, hands shaking because this was not luck. This was repetition and burns and the stubborn belief that I was not a phase. A second truck came before I could catch my breath, ugly, dented, cheap. We sanded it in my friend's driveway, painted it the color of a riverstone because I wanted something that looked calm even when the printer jammed and a fryer popped. Catering requests started with just a backyard birthday and grew into corporate lunches where a woman in heels whispered, "Can you handle 300?" I said yes, then went home and wrote lists until dawn. I hired my first employee and realized leadership is feeding other people's families, not just your own. I invited my parents to openings. I texted them the flyer for the pop-up I'd negotiated with a microbrewery. "Proud of you," Mom replied once, followed by a photo of Linda's kids in matching pajamas. When I sent a picture of our first prep kitchen, a cinderblock box with a walk-in that hummed like a spaceship, Dad wrote back, "Nice. How is David?" "He's arguing before a judge next month, big deal." It became a reflex for them, the pivot back to the children who made sense. Revenue crossed 7 figures the year I stopped apologizing for being tired. I sat with my accountant, the good kind, who doesn't flinch at flowery receipts, and he said, "You know you've done $1 million this year, right?" At that moment, I thought of my mother's text about garlic. I thought of every time someone said, "playing restaurant." I went home, fell asleep on a flour sack, and laughed in my dream. By then, I had a small office with a desk that was always sticky no matter how much I wiped it. There were schedules pinned everywhere, color-coded to keep the new hires from quitting when the lunch rush hit like a storm. We had a benefits plan, a bulletin board with birthdays, a jar where people could scribble ideas that became specials. I learned how to talk to a banker without shrinking, how to walk through a build-out with a contractor and insist on outlets exactly where I wanted them, how to pick tile that hides spills and still looks like intention. David visited once, passing through on a work trip. He stood in my kitchen doorway, looked at the line, and said, "Impressive. But when are you finishing your degree?" I handed him a hairnet. He laughed like I'd told a joke. Linda stopped by with the kids, who asked a million questions and left with churros. She hugged me in the parking lot and whispered, "You must be exhausted." It wasn't criticism, but it was the most honest thing anyone in my family had said to me in years. When I signed the lease on the first sit-down place, I sent my parents a photo of the empty dining room, the way the light pooled across the floor at 4 in the afternoon. My mother replied with a heart emoji and a link to a video of my nephew's school play. My father wrote, "Be careful with debt." And I was. Riverstone Hall opened with mismatched chairs we made look intentional and menus I rewrote until the printer hated me. People came. They posted, they lingered, they brought grandparents on Sundays. We made a profit the first quarter. The second location followed, then a third. My catering team handled 10 weddings in 1 month and nobody cried except me, once, behind the walk-in, because the generator failed and then didn't, and I couldn't unclench for an hour. On that day, I didn't reply to my mother's message right away. I opened my laptop instead, the same battered silver one with a flour-dusted spacebar, and logged into the Riverstone Hall backend. The lunch crew clattered pans below my office. The steamer hissed like a kettle refusing to settle. I clicked reservations, then upcoming events, the way you do when you need the truth to be a list and not a feeling. There it was, a crisp block of text in the calendar. Mitchell, private dinner, 12 guests. Room, Birch. Status, confirmed. Prepayment, $4,500 received. I leaned closer, as if the screen would flinch. They had even selected the Harvest Feast menu we designed just for the holiday week: cranberry glazed Cornish hens, roasted delicata with sage brown butter, warm Parker rolls, cider panna cotta. There was a note, "Please add a small congratulations card at dessert for David's case win." Another, "Kids at one end of the table. No cilantro." The software let me preview the floor plan. Our long walnut table under the pendant lights, 12 cream linen napkins folded into little envelopes, the copper chargers that always photograph well. They had paid the deposit days ago. I clicked the payment line, $4,500, American Express ending 3011, and saw the timestamp. My mother had written family only to me the same hour she typed her card number to secure the most coveted room in the building. I opened with my hands shaking. If I had been a different kind of daughter, I might have admired the efficiency. I scrolled the guest list as if it might say anyone but that Nancy. It said David Mitchell +1, Linda Carlson +3, Frank and Valerie, Mom and Dad, Grandma's sister Ruth, 2 kid seats, boosters requested. I recognized every name. I could imagine the coats on our brass hooks. David's beautiful wool overcoat, Linda's practical parka, Dad's old leather jacket polished for the occasion. I imagined my mother telling Aunt Valerie, "Such a cozy hall, isn't it?" The absurdity hit me in stages. First as a small laugh, sharp, involuntary, because what else do you do when your mother books your restaurant to exclude you? Then as a weight, low and heavy behind my ribs, the kind that makes you brace both hands on the desk because you're not sure what your body might do with this information. I stared at the word confirmed until the letters went soft. For a minute, 5, 10, time lost its edges. I clicked into the event details again, pretending there might be a mistake, a duplicated last name, a different Mitchell clan with the same careful requests. But there was my mother's email, with its trademark lack of punctuation and a final, "Thank you kindly." I rested my forehead on my wrists and let the screen glow against my closed eyes. The system chirped a new notification, and I flinched. Not them. A corporate inquiry. A birthday. The living proof that Riverstone Hall runs no matter how my personal life refuses to. I minimized the calendar and stared at the desktop photo of our staff from the award night. White shirts, black aprons, my arm around Miguel, Jess's lipstick printed on my cheek. This team turns onions into applause, and the math into paychecks, and my ideas into something you can eat. My mother called those ideas crazy. Now she was paying a $4,500 fee to experience them. I didn't know whether to laugh again or finally cry. In the end, I did neither. Without giving myself time to reconsider, I reached for my phone and dialed the direct number to my manager, Arnold. He picked up on the second ring, his familiar warm voice sounding rushed, as if he was already juggling too many things at once. "Riverstone Hall, this is Arnold." "It's me," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Cancel the Mitchell reservation for Thanksgiving night." There was a pause. Then a nervous chuckle. "You mean, cancel the Mitchell reservation? Nancy, that's your family, isn't it? There must be some mistake." "No mistake," I replied flatly. "Cancel it. Refund what needs refunding. I don't care about the prep cost, just do it." Another pause. I could hear him flipping through paperwork. "Nancy, that's a $4,500 prepayment. The chefs already placed special orders for the holiday menu. We've got the wine selections reserved, the turkey and trimmings lined up." "Arnold." My tone cut through his objections. "Cancel it." He hesitated, and I imagined him running a hand through his thinning hair, as he always did when he was nervous. "I don't mean to step out of line, but think about this. This is business. It's profit. Family drama doesn't belong here. Let them eat, let them pay, and you can keep your distance. Why punish yourself and us financially?" The logic of his words hung in the air. For a moment, I almost let myself falter. Almost. But then I pictured my mother's text again. "Find yourself another place." My throat tightened with the burn of humiliation. No, I wasn't going to let that happen. I don't want them here. Not as customers. Not as guests. Arnold exhaled heavily. "Nancy, you're talking about throwing away nearly $5,000, not to mention the goodwill of 12 people who are influential in this town. You know how word spreads. What if they take it to social media? What if they smear the restaurant?" I let his words wash over me, then answered with a calmness I didn't feel. "Let them. I'd rather lose a reservation than lose my self-respect." Silence. Then his voice softened. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," I said. "Cancel it, Arnold." "That's an order." There was a long, reluctant pause, and then, "All right. I'll take care of it. But I hope you know what you're doing." When the call ended, I lowered the phone and stared at my reflection in the black screen of my laptop. My hands were trembling, but my jaw was set. It wasn't about money. It was about principle. I closed my laptop with a sharp snap, the decision solidifying in me like concrete. Whatever storm this cancellation unleashed, I would weather it. Better to face their outrage than to serve them the feast of their hypocrisy on silver platters. This was my place. My rules. The phone rang barely an hour after I gave Arnold the order. I didn't have to look at the screen to know who it was. My mother's name burned across the display like a flare in the night. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at it. The part of me that had spent years chasing crumbs of her approval wanted to hit decline, to punish her with silence the way she had punished me with indifference. But the part of me that still ached for acknowledgement, even in her panic, pressed accept. "Nancy." Her voice cracked through the receiver, not polished and controlled the way she always sounded at church gatherings or on the phone with relatives. No, this was frantic, harried, the sound of a woman whose plans had just collapsed. "You have to help me," she blurted before I could say a word. "The restaurant canceled our reservation." Just like that. Do you understand? 12 people, all confirmed, all traveling from different states, and now we have nowhere to go for Thanksgiving dinner. I pinched the bridge of my nose, forcing my breathing to stay even. "What happened?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "They wouldn't give me a reason," she snapped. "They just said it was canceled. Refunded. What good is that? Everyone's already bought their tickets, taken time off work, made plans around this. I've got people coming from Ohio, Tennessee, even Aunt Ruth from Pennsylvania, and now what? All the other places are booked solid. I called half a dozen already, and they practically laughed at me. It's Thanksgiving week, Nancy. Do you have any idea how impossible it is to find a restaurant for 12 people with only 2 days' notice?" I could picture her, pacing the kitchen with the phone clutched tight, hair falling out of place, lipstick smudged from biting her lip. My mother hated nothing more than looking unprepared, and now the prospect of telling her siblings and cousins that the grand dinner she had promised was gone must have felt like a public execution. "You've always got contacts, right?" she continued, her voice pitching higher. "Chefs, caterers, those little food people you're always chatting with. Can't you call someone? Get us into another place? Please, Nancy. This is a catastrophe." I let the silence linger. She must have heard the weight of it, because she rushed on, softening her tone in a way I hadn't heard since I was a child. "You know people. You could fix this. Just use those connections you're always talking about. Call in a favor. If anyone can save this, it's you." It was almost comical. The same woman who had sent me a message reading family only was now asking me to swoop in and save the very holiday I had been excluded from. "Why me?" I asked quietly. "Because you're good at this sort of thing," she said quickly, as though the words were painful. "I know you've got contacts in restaurants, in catering, in whatever it is you do. You always manage to pull something together. I'm asking you, Nancy. For the family." "For the family?" The phrase tasted bitter. I thought about all the times I had been made to feel like the wrong daughter. The one whose choices were embarrassing, whose work was never real enough, professional enough, respectable enough. And now here was my mother, begging for help from the daughter she had cast aside. "I'll see what I can do," I said finally, keeping my voice cool. The relief in her exhale was immediate, almost pitiful. "Thank God. Nancy, really, if you can fix this, I'll be so grateful. You'll be saving us all from humiliation. People are already on the road. There's no time to waste. Please do whatever you have to do." She spoke the words quickly, but they landed heavy on me. When the call ended, I set the phone down slowly on the desk, staring at it like it was some foreign object. In all my 32 years, I had never once been the one they turned to in a crisis. That role had always belonged to David, the successful lawyer in New York, or to Linda, the steady nurse with her picture-perfect family. But now the tables had turned. Replacing Riverstone Hall was impossible, and my mother knew it. Every other respectable restaurant in town was fully booked. Caterers were overcommit, supermarkets stripped bare. She was really trapped. And I wasn't sure yet whether I wanted to help her, or watch her plans unravel into the chaos she had always let consume me. I sat at my desk for a long while after the call ended, fingers tracing the grain of the wood, phone resting beside me like a loaded weapon. I picked up my phone and scrolled to her name. My thumb hovered for a moment before I pressed call. She answered almost immediately, her voice tight and brittle. "Well, did you find something?" I took a slow breath. "I'll help," I said evenly, "but there's one condition." A pause. "What condition?" "There has to be a 13th guest at the table." I could almost hear the tension bristle across the line. Her voice dropped, cautious. "Who?" "Me," I stated. The silence that followed was heavy enough to make my chest ache. In that pause, I could imagine her face, lips pressed thin, brows drawn tight, eyes darting as if searching for a way out. Finally, she exhaled, sharp and reluctant. If that's what it takes, she said quietly. Her words lacked warmth, but I didn't care. For once, I wasn't asking. I was setting the terms. Good, I replied, letting the firmness in my voice leave no room for doubt. Then I'll handle it. We ended the call without pleasantries. I leaned back in my chair, my pulse racing, a strange mix of triumph and nerves coursing through me. It wasn't the reconciliation I once dreamed of, but it was enough. This Thanksgiving, I would not be erased. By evening, the birch room looked like a quiet promise. The walnut table was dressed in cream linen and copper chargers, the birch branches in the corner urns catching the gold of the pendant lights. I had told the staff to keep everything exactly as planned, no more, no less, and to treat me as any other guest until I signaled otherwise. My name was on a place card at the very end, between the kids and Aunt Ruth. 13th. They arrived in waves, coats damp from a thin, cold drizzle, voices too loud from the airport bar or the long drive. David swept in first with a lawyer's quick hug and a glance at his watch that meant, I'm important, remember? Linda slid past him with a small, tight smile meant only for me. Behind them came Uncle Frank and Aunt Valerie, my parents close behind, my mother's lipstick already worn from nervous chewing. Isn't this lovely? She announced to the room like she'd designed it herself. So tasteful. She ran her fingers along the walnut as if it might purr. I took my seat and watched the machine I'd built start to hum. Water poured. Bread arrived warm and fragrant. A server described the harvest feast in the exact cadence we'd rehearsed. Family only? Uncle Frank boomed, lifting his glass. What a treat. His eyes slid to me amused. Didn't think you'd make it, kiddo. Still messing around with food trucks. There it was, the old line, the smile that isn't a smile. It rolled across the table like a cue for laughter. A few chuckled. Someone said, Frank, in the warning tone people use when they agree but want to seem kind. I felt the heat rise in my chest, then pass, like I'd practiced breathing it out 1,000 times behind a grill. I answered with a pleasant nod. Nice to see you too, Frank. We ate the first course, delicata with sage brown butter, the skins caramelized just right. The kids argued softly over a Parker roll. Dad asked David about New York. Aunt Ruth told the same story about the ticket agent who recognized her from last year's snow delay. Through it all, my staff moved like water, silent, sure, precise. If anyone noticed how easily they read my small gestures, no one said a thing. Service is very professional, Aunt Valerie said, loud enough for the server to hear. You can always tell when a place has a good manager. I took a sip of wine. The plaque by the host stand downstairs, the Metropolitan silver fork, felt like a secret talisman in my pocket. I had chosen tonight's rhythm carefully. Let them settle. Let them praise what they think is theirs to judge. Then I show them. The Cornish hens arrived, glistening under cranberry glaze. David took a photo for his story with the same theatrical care he uses when he wants the world to clap. Now this, he said, is what I call Thanksgiving. Much nicer than that one place last year, Mom added, eyes shining as our server poured her wine. They oversalted everything. I could tell the chef was inexperienced. I watched the pour stop at exactly the line I'd taught them, watched my mother nod as if she'd approved it. My hands were steady. My heartbeat wasn't. Still, Uncle Frank said, sawing at his hen, it's wild you got us a room here, Janice. He always uses my mother's name like a punchline. This is a tough reservation. Must have cost a fortune. You know somebody? Did Linda help? Linda's fork paused, then moved on. She didn't look at me, but the color rose in her cheeks. There are 1,000 ways to keep a secret. Sometimes you do it by breathing evenly and chewing. Dessert cards were printed with the little congratulations for David's latest case, just as my mother had requested in her notes. When the panna cotta went down, smooth as prayer, I finally felt the click. It was time. Uncle Frank dabbed his mouth and leaned back, satisfied, ready to play the next round of his favorite sport. So, Nance, he said, voice booming just enough to make the kids flinch, are you still messing around with food trucks? Chairs creaked. Silverware quieted. The room grew small and clear, like a lens focusing. I set my napkin down carefully, fingers flat, and turned to him. My voice came from somewhere lower than usual, a place I had been building in private for years. See this restaurant? It's all mine. And 4 others. Last year we made $10 million. The words didn't land so much as stopped the air. For a second, nothing moved. Not a glass, not a candle flame. The hush was total, like every sound had taken a step back to make room. A server, crossing behind Aunt Valerie with coffee, stalled mid-step and then continued, composure flawless. David's phone slipped a fraction in his hand. Aunt Ruth blinked, working the words through the math of her memories. My father went very still, like a deer in the split second before it realizes the lights are a car. Across the table, Linda exhaled, not a laugh, not a sob. A letting go. What? My mother said finally, so softly it hardly counted as speech. Mine, I repeated, not unkindly. I let my gaze travel the room, this room I had birthed and sanded and paid for by not sleeping. Riverstone Hall is my flagship. The others are smaller, and there's a catering arm. But this is my home. Uncle Frank stared at me, jaw unhinged. You're just joking. I shook my head once. A sound escaped my mother, halfway between a gasp and a cough. But the reservation was under your name, I said. Like any other guest. David recovered first. Lawyers always do. He huffed out a laugh that wasn't a laugh. 10 million? Come on. Gross, I said, because truth doesn't have to apologize for existing. Not net. But you'd be surprised what smart margins and relentless hours can do. No one laughed and no one spoke. Somewhere down the hall, glass clinked on glass in another room, a celebration I didn't have to belong to for it to be real. The candles crackled softly. The children looked from face to face, reading whether no one had taught them the names for yet. In the stillness, details sharpened, the micro-scratch that runs across the walnut in a shallow smile, the faint citrus in the hand soap we switched to after a guest's note, the steady, competent hands of the server placing coffee in front of my father like nothing world-altering had just been said. My mother tried again, clearing her throat. But you never said. I was busy cooking, I said, and for the first time all evening I allowed a thin edge to touch my voice. Busy building. Busy making sure that if any of you ever walked into one of my places, you would have nothing to complain about. No one reached for a joke. Not even Frank. Linda's eyes met mine, and in that look lived 100 small kindnesses she had managed over the years, quiet as breath. She picked up her spoon, took a measured bite of panna cotta, and nodded as if tasting a truth. I folded my napkin and set it beside my plate. The room felt different now, angles changed by the simple fact of me. They had come here to be impressed by a restaurant. They hadn't expected to discover who was impressing them. My father's hand cupped his coffee like it might answer a question. Aunt Valerie glanced at the plaque on the dessert card, reading it as if it had appeared from nowhere. I leaned back, letting the quiet settle into something almost gentle. I'm glad you like the meal, I said, not smiling. We worked very hard on it. No one contradicted me. No one could. The evidence surrounded them in wood and light, and the taste still on their tongues. The loser they had sent to find another place had been their hostess all along, keeping the rhythm, charting the course, deciding when the music changed. No one moved at first. The birch room held its breath, candles steady, steam curling from coffee like something trying to leave the conversation. My words, it's mine. And 4 others. Last year we made $10 million, were still hanging over the table like a chandelier no one remembered installing. Mom's lips parted. The color drained from her face so quickly I worried, absurdly, that she might faint onto the panna cotta. She reached for her water and missed, fingers tapping the stem. Well, she started, voice papery, if you had told us, if you'd mentioned, we could have. You never asked. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. You wrote me off because I didn't fit into your picture of the perfect family. She flinched. I watched the words land, then take root. Across from her, Dad stared at the cup in his hands like answers might steep out of it if he waited long enough. Mom tried again, gathering the scraps of authority. But Nancy, that isn't fair. We were concerned. Those food trucks, you were always so tired, and it seemed unstable. We didn't want to pressure you with questions. We thought it would embarrass you if. I shook my head. You never risked being embarrassed. You risked not having a story to brag about. Knives stilled midair. A spoon clinked against porcelain, the sound too loud in a room that had just learned who it belonged to. Uncle Frank cleared his throat, making a show of dabbing his mouth. Now, let's not turn a lovely evening into a cross-examination. He tried on a chuckle that didn't fit his face. We're all pleased as punch you've done well. The pause before done well was an entire lifetime of low expectations. I looked at him, the man who had asked if I was still messing around with food trucks, and then past him, to the server refilling water with the same calm he brought to every table, even this one. Frank, I said evenly, you can save the jokes for after you tip my staff. He blinked. The children watched me with wide eyes that made me feel both very young and very old at once. David recovered next, the lawyer's smile sliding into place like a practiced mask. Look, he said, hands open in mediation. This is surprising. But it's good surprising. We're proud of you, of course we are. We just didn't know. He gestured with his phone as if proof might materialize on the screen. You could have texted. I mean, I'm in New York, but I would have flown out for a grand opening or something. You were tagged in 3 posts, Linda murmured before she could stop herself. Her gaze dipped to her plate, then back to me. I should have done more. David exhaled through his nose. It wasn't a sigh. It was surrender adjacent. All right. I didn't ask. Not really. He looked at me and let the mask slip an inch. I was busy and fine, self-involved. I assumed the trucks were a phase. That's on me. Mom bristled. Anyway, I asked. I asked you all the time. You asked if I was done playing chef. I met her eyes and didn't look away. You asked when I'd finish college, get a real job, find someone who didn't mind the garlic smell. You didn't ask about the burn on my wrist from the flat top at 2 a.m., or the time the generator died and I saved a wedding with a flashlight and 2 camp stoves. You didn't ask how payroll feels at midnight when 6 people are counting on you to make rent. You didn't ask about the lease, the build-out, the health code reinspection, the first time we went red to green because we earned it, not because we got lucky. You didn't ask who I was loving or whether I slept, or if the 3 a.m. phone call meant the freezer died again. You asked when I was going to stop. Her mouth opened, shut. A tiny click of teeth. We wanted stability, she whispered. And I am stability, I said, softer now but still steady. For myself. For my team. For the people who come here and celebrate things that matter to them. I built it while you were looking the other way. Aunt Valerie reached for dignity and came up with etiquette. This really isn't dinner conversation, she murmured. This, I said, gesturing at the table, is exactly dinner conversation. This is the first time you're all looking at me. I'm not wasting it on weather. Dad's chair creaked as he leaned forward the smallest degree. We worried, he said, eyes on his hands. Hospitality is a hard business. Restaurants fail. Most do, I agreed. That's why I learned to negotiate produce at dawn and ask for 3 extra outlets on the east wall. It's why I sleep with my shoes next to the bed. You thought I was playing house? I was learning how to carry one. The kids glanced at each other, bored by adult shame and hypnotized by the copper chargers. I envied them for a second, their capacity to let a storm pass without asking what it meant. Mom found her footing in the familiar. If we hurt you, she began, and the if was a blade. You did, I said. No varnish. But you're not special. Life hurts. What is special is that you invited everyone but me to a holiday at my table. I let the truth sit there, clean and terrible. And then you asked me to fix it. Her hand flew to her mouth. The memory of that text, family only. Find yourself another place, flashed across her face like a headline. I thought, she swallowed. I thought you would be uncomfortable. That this would feel like pressure. It felt like being erased, I said. Uncle Frank tried again, out of habit more than courage. Let's not do this. It's Thanksgiving. We've got the birds, Frank, Aunt Valerie warned, but I was already shaking my head. Let's do it, I said. Let's do it right now, while the coffee's hot and my staff is close enough to hear me stand up for them too. I watched the server fold his hands behind his back, posture a fraction taller. You don't get to enjoy what I built and keep pretending I don't exist. No one argued. The quiet wasn't fragile anymore. It was listening. Linda cleared her throat. Nance. I'm sorry I kept my head down. I should have corrected people. I should have bragged for you when you wouldn't. She looked at Mom. We all should have. David nodded once, to his credit. I told people you were doing the food truck thing. Like it was a hobby. I didn't ask follow-ups because I didn't want to feel behind. His smile was brief and rueful. Turns out I am behind. Dad looked at me then, finally, like he was forcing his eyes to adjust to a stronger bulb. What do you want from us, Nancy? His voice was careful, a man stepping onto unfamiliar ice. I want nothing, I said, and meant it in a way that surprised even me. I wanted a seat at the table. I took it. I gestured to the napkin at my place setting, to the 13th chair I'd claimed. Mom touched the edge of her dessert plate with a trembling finger, then withdrew it as if the china might burn. I looked around at the faces I knew better than they knew me. Here's what happens next, I said, keeping my voice level, almost gentle. You eat. You tip well. You treat my staff like the professionals they are. No one applauded. They just sat with it, the way you sit with a taste you can't quite place and realize, after a beat, that it's something you've been missing. I picked up my spoon and took a bite of panna cotta I'd had on a dozen test nights, assessing the set, adjusting the cider reduction a quarter turn sweeter. Our dinner didn't stop, it recalibrated. Voices lowered, postures straightened, jokes died on the plate. The Birch room felt different, as if someone had nudged the frame and the picture finally hung level. Servers still moved through their queues, but my family's eyes followed me now, not the hens, not the copper, not the pendant lights. To me, questions arrived like cautious guests. Aunt Valerie asked about the bread, then caught herself. Your bread, she corrected, cheeks pink. Uncle Frank cleared his throat twice before venturing a safe topic. These chargers, good heft. He set his palm on one as if testing a handshake. Even his bluster had lost weight. Dad studied the grain of the table, then looked up, startled to find me still here, solid. How many people do you employ? He asked, voice even. 48 across the restaurants, I said. 62 if you count event crews. Health insurance for full-time, paid sick leave for everyone, even dish. English lessons on Tuesdays in the prep kitchen. It keeps us human. He nodded once, a small movement that meant more than it looked. He took another sip of coffee, slower this time, like a man learning a new ritual. David tucked his phone away, as if the moment deserved both hands, and asked something practical. Supply chain nightmare this year. How did you keep costs in line? Early contracts. We hedged on flour and butter last spring. Local farms for greens. I took a hit on citrus, because Thanksgiving deserves brightness. I kept it spare. Let the competence sit on the surface like glaze. Across the table, the kids resumed being kids. Rolls became moons. A crumb war skirmished softly near the butter plate. Their normalcy anchored the room. Even revelations have to share space with small appetites. Mom had been silent so long I almost forgot the shape of her voice. When it came, it was thread-thin. A whisper meant only for me. I'm proud of you. I held her gaze, not cruel, not kind, just exact. You should have proven it with actions, not words. The ellipsis hung between us like a bridge that hadn't been built. She looked down, thumb worrying the seam of her napkin, remorse and habit tugging in opposite directions. I let the moment stand without rescuing it. Service continued. Coffee refreshed. Wine refilled to the line and no further. My staff checked on allergies, cleared silently, reset, watched me the way teams do when the person in charge decides to be visible. I nodded when their eyes flicked my way. The nod said, "You've done well. We're fine." Aunt Ruth asked for a tour of the kitchen, then stopped mid-sentence, remembering the roles had shifted. If that's appropriate, she amended. Another time, I said gently, "They're plating for a table of 12 in oak. It's rush behind the door right now." "Right, of course," she murmured, like she'd glimpsed a weather system on the other side of the swinging glass. Uncle Frank attempted a toast and made it to the second clause before abandoning his usual thunder. To Nancy. To knowing things we should have known sooner. He lifted his glass. No one corrected him. They just followed. The first bite after that tasted different to everyone, I think. For years, I'd been the seasoning they pretended not to taste. Now they were trying to name it. Dad surprised me again. Cash flow on holidays, do you bonus the team? Holiday pay plus a service share bump, I said. And a cab voucher if the trains run slow. No one walks home cold on my watch. He made the smallest sound, approval wrapped in humility. It was as close to well done as his generation knows how to pronounce when they're learning a new language at the table. David asked for a card for a colleague and didn't perform the ask for the room. He slipped it into his wallet like something he planned to use. Linda told the kids to sit up straighter when the floor captain passed. Valerie thanked the busser by name after reading his tag. Tiny adjustments, but I noticed everyone. The balance had moved. You could hear it click. Mom tried again, carefully. If you ever wanted appearances or a fundraiser or... She stopped, realizing she was speaking in the only currency she knew. If you wanted me to help, she corrected softly. I'll ask, I said, not unkindly. But I won't need permission. She nodded, eyes bright. She didn't reach for my hand. I didn't offer mine. Not yet. By the time pies appeared in the hands of two servers, slices already set, whipped cream holding its shape, the conversation had a new center of gravity. They asked about menus, seasonality, training. I answered without selling. I wasn't auditioning. I was hosting. When the check presenter arrived, Dad didn't touch it. He looked to me. I tipped before he could, folding the service into the total and adding extra because the room had asked more of my people tonight than timing and polish. The pen felt good in my hand. The signature looked like a decision. Coats were claimed, hugs managed, promises made that might finally stick. In the doorway, the plaque near the host stand glinted. Aunt Ruth paused to read, then glanced back at me as if seeing the name anew. Uncle Frank shook the floor captain's hand like he meant it. David told a server, excellent job, and the server believed him. At last, Mom stepped close enough that I could smell the familiar mix of powder and peppermint tea. Sorry, I didn't see you, she said, barely audible. Not the way you are. I know, I answered. It was the truest way to end the night without pretending we'd tied anything up. The rain had eased to a silver mist outside. My reflection in the glass looked steady, not triumphant. This wasn't victory. It was equilibrium, the room finally matching the weight of the work behind it. They had come to dinner thinking they knew the menu, but they left understanding the kitchen. That night, when the last plates were cleared away and the wine glasses stood half full, I leaned back in my chair and felt something I hadn't felt in years, freedom. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't the bad daughter, the disappointment, the one left out of family photographs and whispered conversations. I was Nancy Mitchell, 32, self-made, and finally seen. The label they had pinned on me since childhood had slipped off, and not because they decided to remove it, but because I had torn it away myself. Family is important, of course. But personal value and self-respect are much more important. Blood may connect us, but it should never be used as a chain to bind us to roles that shrink us. That Thanksgiving, I understood a truth I wish I had learned earlier. You cannot force your loved ones to respect you. But you can respect yourself enough not to accept less than you deserve. As my relatives whispered goodbyes, avoiding my eyes or stealing quick glances, I didn't feel bitterness. Just calm. Even my mother's final words, "I'm proud of you," no longer pierced or healed. They were simply words, far too late. What mattered was me, walking out of Riverstone Hall that night with my head high, no longer the girl they had erased from invitations. Never let even your closest family decide where you sit at the holiday table. Whether it's Thanksgiving or Christmas or a regular Sunday dinner, your place is yours to claim. If they won't give it to you, you build your own table, and you make it bigger, brighter, and stronger than they ever imagined. And now I want to ask you, if you are watching this right now, have you ever been made to feel invisible by your own family? Have they dismissed your choices, belittled your work, or excluded you because you didn't fit their picture of success? Write your own story in the comments below. Your experience might give strength to someone else who feels alone right now. And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, because this space isn't just about my story, it's about ours.